Hello, I'm Anna Vries. I'd like to thank our listeners who have provided many leads into the host's whereabouts as they continue their murderous journey across North America. We have an update regarding the researcher and colleague who began this investigation, who is still a missing person in the state of Pennsylvania. We have some disturbing new revelations. It appears that the hosts of the show have become aware of this investigation. We knew this to be inevitable, but we did not expect it so soon. After we posted our last episode, I received an email guiding me to a live video feed. Concerned by its appearance, I opened this message inside a secure browser. The live feed seemed to be transmitted from a game camera or closed-circuit TV. The lens focused on a patch of sidewalk next to a sewer drain. A lawn could be partially seen in the background. No homes or house numbers were visible due to the angle of the camera, which is from a high vantage, potentially on a telephone pole or tree. I recorded this live feed for the 30 hours that it was available to me. The feed shows residents of this unknown neighborhood going for walks, taking dogs and children down the sidewalk into and out of the camera's frame. Many of the passers-by can be seen making faces and grimacing as they come near the sewer drain. Facial gestures that give the impression that some terrible smell is emanating from the vicinity of the sewer. The choice of camera angle draws particular attention to that sewer drain. The 17th passerby on the feed can be seen wearing a Pittsburgh Penguins jersey. Another resident can be seen wearing an Allegheny College sweatshirt. And 9 hours later, there is another appearance of an Allegheny College logo on a baseball cap. I feel confident that the video's location is somewhere in or near Meadville, Pennsylvania. My research team is currently blanketing the town in the hopes that the area displayed on this feed can be located and evidence recovered. Initially, I was dubious. We needed to determine the veracity of this video. It is entirely possible, perhaps likely, that the video is a red herring. Could it be a prank sent by fans of the podcast, role-playing as the hosts? Or perhaps it was a red herring sent by the hosts themselves in an effort to waste my time and distract me from what is really going on. I've considered these possibilities and more. The great difficulty of this investigation is in sifting through what information is fictitious and what is fact. And we can't completely disregard the possibility that it is a direct communication with the hosts. The problem with this particular lead is that it's curated. My fear is that this video is real, that this is a location containing forensic evidence of my missing colleague or someone else. Killers have often taunted investigators with cryptic clues. We took samples and recorded images of many of the drains in question, but we uncovered no evidence of human remains. Were we being misled or simply searching in the wrong place? At present, I'm feeling pessimistic that my colleague, my friend, will ever be found. We've kept her identity anonymous, but I pray that one day I can reveal her name to you under happier circumstances, and that she will be able to join me in writing the final chapter of this story. So what do we know? There are some small but important facts that we've learned from studying this program. The hosts of the show refer to themselves in their intro as the Terrible Twins. Are they actually brothers, or is this a metaphorical connection given to their alleged occupation? One thing that is difficult to fake for such a long program is a person's accent. We've had their accents analyzed by a linguistic expert who believes their regional origins to be somewhere on the East Coast, most likely the tri-state area of Connecticut, New York, or New Jersey. Also, the survivor of the abduction aboard the Queen Marquette Riverboat Casino in Iowa was able to provide facial details to a sketch artist. Sketches have been made and distributed to law enforcement agencies. The two individuals do indeed appear to be twins, middle-aged, Caucasian males, approximately 6 feet tall, with dark brown hair, mustaches, and beards. They have significant underbites, which might explain the lisps. The Queen Marquette abduction survivor noted they complained frequently of what they called tummy aches. If you encounter these two, please proceed with caution. And as always, be on the lookout.
Pipe down there.
Jesus, it's all day with this guy. He never stops.
Keep pushing my button, see what happens. I'll take away that bucket.
He's gonna do it.
Not another peep. Or the bucket goes. Alright? Alright, bucket's gone. The bucket is gone.
Okay, can we start?
Yes, please.
Welcome back to a new episode of, as those who are investigating us like to say, be on the lookout.
Hello and welcome.
The devilish duo return, this time with a ghoulish tale of horror.
To tickle your
Tonsils, toesies, tickle something ghoulish. I don't know. It's ghoulish, that's what it is. I'm sorry, this guy threw up my rhythm a little bit.
This episode will tickle your
Fancy.
tickle anything that makes you feel
Something's getting tickled. Don't worry about it. You'll know it when you feel it. In this episode, everything gets tickled. We're bringing you a ghoulish tale of horror set in the land of the oyster.
the land of the lobster, Portland, Maine. Let's just start.
Okay. When you walk through the thick, double-plated doors of the Slaughterhouse, a recording studio and practice space in Portland, Maine, you're welcomed by a cacophony of amplified sound. The Slaughterhouse was the premier location for Portland's death metal scene. Set in an industrial zone on the edge of town, the Slaughterhouse derived its name from the building's historic past as a meat processing plant called Sarkeesian Beef and Pork. Sarkeesian Beef and Pork closed for business in 2001 and was left unoccupied until 2011 when Zach Bruner, entrepreneur and drummer for the band Decay Array, saw potential in the abandoned building. It was the grimness of the place, Bruner said in a 2015 interview for the music blog Unholy Creatures. I couldn't believe that no one had bought it yet. I was taken on a tour by the realtor, and immediately it felt right. We wanted a place that could do three things: house a recording studio, provide practice spaces, and serve as a venue for shows. It was perfect. Structurally, it had a good solid foundation. The roof was in decent shape, the plumbing didn't leak, and it had plenty of electricity. Since it was wired up for the machinery in the main processing room, we knew it could handle a massive backline of 100-watt tube amps with double cabs. The steel beams were heavy-duty enough to hang a massive PA system off of it. No major work needed to be done on the building. Cosmetically, it looked so grim. It was sick. Those huge red brick walls would practically loom over you from under the gray Portland sky. It was creepy as shit. It's got a big lot out front for parking where the refrigerated trucks used to line up, delivering cattle and pigs, or loading up with pallets of packaged cuts for grocery stores. It's got thick, insulated double doors everywhere to keep in the cold air. Those worked great to baffle sounds. The last headache we wanted was some pissed off neighbors complaining about the noise at the town hall meetings. Keep the sound in. That was our requirement. The groups we host are loud. Really fucking loud, man. If you don't plug up your ears at one of our shows, those fuckers will ring for 2 days. Or at least, that used to be the case. But the best thing about the building, it was cheap. Dirt cheap. We figured no one wanted it because the building came as is, meaning you have to figure out what to do with all the packaging machines, tabletop buzzsaws, and whatnot. Me and my business partner Hart were like, the main processing room will be unbelievable for shows. Great ambiance, you know what I mean. The audience is forced to stand on that white tile floor in the shadows of all that steel. It would be fucking epic. The only problem was it still had a lingering smell of rotten blood. I'm vegan, so that I was not crazy about. But the inspector said we just needed to hire a plumber to scrape out the drainage pipes on the main floor. Next thing you know, we're at the bank, putting down a deposit, and it's ours. Of all the bullshit you deal with starting a business, we were not expecting the clusterfuck storm that was headed our way. The Slaughterhouse quickly became the center of metal culture in New England. They hosted the top billings of the death metal scene: Corpse Dancer, Rigor Mortis, Basement Creeper, Death Knell, and more. But they started to have problems.
Hart Silva, co-owner of the Slaughterhouse, said it in an interview for Permanent Eclipse magazine. Quote, "We were fucking hyped. It looked so sick. We were responsible for so many bands moving to Portland. If you wanted to network with other bands and promoters, you had to rent a practice space at Slaughterhouse. And we had nothing but rooms to spare. We didn't even use the upper floors. The freight elevator needed to be repaired anyway, so it would have been hell to lug all your gear up there. We booked out the first month and had a running waiting list to get rooms. Our engineers had to turn people away for studio time. We were floored. We took a risk and it paid off. We were high off our own supply. I didn't notice anything weird until Zach brought it to my attention."
The first major problem, Zach Brunner said, was that goddamn smell. We brought in 3 plumbers and roto-rooted every pipe in the building. It wouldn't go away. It was the smell of dead animals rotting out. We tried renting industrial air purifiers, and it didn't even make a dent in the stench. It didn't hurt business at all. In fact, it kind of drew more people in. A lot of bands just bought scented candles and incense for their rooms. Then we had a church group protest outside, calling us Satan's pigs and all that. Hart got spit on once, but other than that, everyone dug it. The local papers wrote about it all the time. Free press. Watch the music videos from 2013, and you'll see a lot of clips of those lunatics cut in. Like I said, there's always bullshit when you start a new business. Nothing we couldn't handle. But all the little things began to take their toll.
Did Zach talk about the upper floor? The incident up there? No? Well, it's not really my story to tell, but fuck it. Whatever. Tons of people already know about it. I can tell you my side. Okay, where do I start? Running a business is stressful. Even when it's successful, especially when it's successful, actually. We weren't sleeping great, we were drinking too much, getting high too often. It fucks with your head after a while. So, we wanted someone on site at all times since we were open 24 hours a day. In case of a problem. Zach took the night shifts because I needed to drive my kids to school during the week. So I show up one morning to take over after dropping off my kid. Zach's gone. I figured he stepped out for a smoke, but he doesn't show up. Usually we have coffee together and update each other on what happened during the night. I figured maybe he snuck away to the recording studio to catch a few Z's. But when I checked, they were all empty. So I text him to make sure he wasn't in the hospital or some shit. No answer. He was stressing a little more than me at that time, so I'm like, mental health day. Go for it, dude. You've earned it. But he didn't show up for his shift that night either. So I started to get freaked out. I called his girlfriend, she hadn't heard from him. Where the fuck is he? It wasn't until the next day that we found him.
Here is Zach's take. I don't know what happened. I guess I was sleepwalking. At the time, I was taking Adderall and caffeine pills to stay up at night. And you do that too long, your memory takes a hit. When you hear the stories of old rockers who don't remember a whole decade of their career because they were rolling on speed or cocaine, it's not the drugs that messes up your memory. At least not directly. It's a lack of sleep. It's a little hazy, but I was in the main office, right off the front lobby, going through our accounting ledgers from the past week, and I remember hearing what sounded like praying. We don't get too many experimental bands, but sometimes a group adds sound effects that are meant to be disturbing. At the beginning of a song, or during an interlude. Animal howls, babies crying, documentary sounds of war, stuff to really freak out the squares, you know. So I got curious and I went walking around the first floor to see whose space the praying was coming from. The place was pretty dead. So I go and open the fire exit, and the praying is echoing in the stairwell. People aren't allowed upstairs. It's a big place and we don't want anyone getting hurt. I mean, there are meat hooks hanging throughout all the halls. So I'm pissed and I march up there. You need a flashlight because there's a wiring issue on that floor. I remember turning on my cell phone flashlight, and that's it. I must have been half asleep already. You know that feeling when you're on the verge of falling asleep? Not quite awake, but not fully conked out? I don't think anyone was up there. I think I was hearing things from lack of sleep.
I found him at the end of my next shift. I got this worry like, what if he was fucking about upstairs and got locked in an old freezer? No one would be able to hear him call for help. It's like being in a horror movie up there. Chains and hooks and big steel tables everywhere. Right out of Hellraiser. I'm calling Zach's name. Nothing. I check the old freezers. They're empty. Then I open the door to this big storage room. There he is. Standing there like a fucking zombie in the dark. He didn't wake up until I slapped him as hard as I could.
Like I said, I hadn't been sleeping. I guess it all caught up to me. I remember wandering around in the dark and finding that room, and I just sort of got stuck.
The door wasn't locked, so I don't know why he couldn't get out.
The only way I can describe it is that it felt like being on an escalator going down, but the exit is on the floor above you. You keep trying to walk out, but you're slowly pulled back down.
The next day I went up to that room with my toolbox to pull the doorknob off, so if it did lock accidentally, or if it was broken in some way, no one else would get trapped. I hated that room. The room had a vibe. Really cold and heavy. The feeling of the hair standing up on the back of your neck, like someone had snuck behind you in the dark. I didn't like being there. I kept shining my flashlight around the room to make sure I was alone, even though nothing was in there. There was nowhere to hide in there anyway. That's when I saw the holes in the far wall. I hadn't seen them when I dragged Zach out of there. The room was long, maybe 40 feet or so, and the far wall was full of divots, like someone had taken a hammer to different spots. Zach and me are from Rhode Island originally, so we didn't know the history of the place. Sarkeesian beef and pork apparently was owned by the mafia. That's why the place had never sold. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. Too many people went in and were never seen again. People were afraid that if you started renovating it, you'd uncover a bunch of bodies. Maybe even Jimmy Hoffa, you know?
I told my friend Fred about it, a local guy in his 70s who's a regular at Brody's bar, and he told me a story about when he was a teenager. Him and two buddies broke into a truck near Sarkeesian's. The truck's cargo was full of cigarette cartons, so they took off with a half a dozen boxes. One of his friends ran his mouth off about their dumb luck, and next thing you know, a Sarkeesian crew comes rolling up to the bar that they were hanging out at, and forced them at gunpoint into a car. The truck, it turns out, had just been jacked by the Sarkeesian crew a few hours earlier. So him and his two friends are taken to the meat plant. They are walked upstairs to an empty concrete room. The concrete floor is covered in blood. It's collecting around the drain in the center of the floor, but that grate is clogged. They're told to kneel there in the blood. They were sure they were going to die. My friend starts praying to St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. One of the guys, thinking that Fred looks a bit familiar, asks his name. My friend's dad actually worked in the plant. Of course, he didn't think that this would have mattered to a crew like the Sarkeesians. But they get off with a warning to never come within a mile of the Sarkeesians ever again. They must have called his dad because his old man was waiting for him in the living room when he got home, and he caught the beating of a lifetime. Fred told me he wondered how many people prayed on their knees in that room before they were shot full of holes. There are crazier stories too. I heard that one of Sarkeesian's own guys was tortured to death after they found out he was trying to leave the organization. They thought he was ratting them out and going on the run, but in reality, him and his brother were starting a folk band. This was in the late 60s, and apparently the guy had gone to the Newport Folk Festival, saw Bob Dylan, and wanted to get into folk music. So he assembles a band with his wife and his brother, and they make plans to move to California. But the crew at Sarkeesian's finds out, and they're suspicious. So they pick up the guy, his wife, and his brother, just like they did to my friend and his buddies, and they bring them to the beef boning unit after hours. As legend goes, one of the line workers from the plant, a knuckle puller named Arturo, was the mob's interrogator. He was rumored to be ex-OVRA, Mussolini's secret police during the war. He'd fled to the US from Italy in the early 50s. The plant workers said they had never heard Arturo say a single word, neither Italian nor English. And during interrogations, he never asked a single question or said a word. He nonchalantly took this made guy, who wanted to be Bob Dylan, and tied him to a chair next to his wife. The crew then told his brother to strip. Once he was completely naked, shivering in the cold air of the boning unit, Arturo strapped his leg to a chain and hoisted him up by the ankle. He dangled there for a minute or so, pissing down his stomach while Arturo honed his boning knife on the ceramic rod. Arturo then did exactly what he did to the cow carcasses every single day. He sliced through the hip joint of this guy's brother and processed him right there. As he cut, the weight of the man helped to pull and separate the flesh from the bone, until his body fell against the tiled floor. His leg remained above, hanging. They say Arturo had a 100% success rate in getting confessions. He didn't need to say a word. They confessed every time. It didn't really matter what they confessed to. In Arturo's eyes, they were all guilty of something. Years later, Arturo was found dead in Mackworth Island State Park. He'd been quartered and beheaded, with his genitals placed in his mouth.
Zach wasn't the only person to get stuck, as we called it, somewhere upstairs. We started blocking all the entranceways, nailing plywood over the doors, but inevitably some band member or roadie or a fan would get in. One kid we found could barely walk out of that upstairs room. We had to carry him down, and when he called his friends, they said they'd thought he'd gone on a bender. He hadn't been heard from for 2 days. We kind of chalked it all up to the drugs mixed with the vibe of the place. People would start to trip and go on a vision quest. It wasn't until a couple years in when the music began to change. It was happening all over the place, especially to the bands who spent a lot of time there in the practice space or the recording studio. I can play you an example to show you what I mean. Here, this is what we were used to. And this is what we began to hear. And this.
No other girl can compete. When I'm without you, I'm incomplete. I miss you all day, I miss you all night.
I mean, what the fuck? We started noticing that a church crowd was showing up to our shows. There are Christian metal bands, but they play mega churches. They don't frequent places like the Slaughterhouse. One of these shows I got to wandering around the crowd. I wanted to know how they heard about the venue. I also wanted to know if they were trying to sabotage our place, because of all the devil stuff. I was shocked to see that they weren't outsiders. They were club regulars. It wasn't a new crowd at all, it was the same metal kids. But they were dressing really square, acting weird. Kind of standoffish, but in a polite way. Zach refused to stay there overnight anymore. He said he was always feeling dazed. He'd wander into unfamiliar parts of the building without any recollection of how he got there. He couldn't remember to do any of his tasks. It scared him bad. He said he was hearing things every night at that point. I was hearing them too. The whole building would explode with noise, like all the machinery was running at full speed on the plant floor. When I ran in there to throw the breaker, it was dead quiet. We hired someone to cover Zach on the night shift, but he didn't last long. None of them did. Zach eventually bailed altogether. After he quit, Zach would still show up from time to time. I found him once in the middle of a sing-along on the top floor. There were 9 or 10 of them sitting in a circle playing music. It was folk music. I couldn't believe it. Zach hated that shit, and here he was singing along with everyone. I think it was a Donovan song. Then one night, Death Knell was set to play, and they came out without their instruments. They all got around one mic and did a cappella, and everyone was loving it. If it had been a year earlier, they would have been taking their lives into their hands, wearing khakis and doing some doo-wop shit over an acoustic guitar and beatboxing. The Slaughterhouse is still going, but it's different. Most of the crowd has shifted to this new folk scene. It's driving me crazy being around all this acapella and finger picking and flannel shit. This wasn't why we started the Slaughterhouse, but I'm not in a financial position to deny customers just because of the music they're into. I've got mortgage payments, I keep trying to recruit death metal bands to rent spaces, play shows here, but they're freaked out by the people. The ones who do stay inevitably get folksy. And I don't know how to say it. They turn strange. Everyone that's into this stuff with the folk scene feels a bit absent. They don't seem to have a personal interest in the music or in building a community. It feels like they're following something external from themselves. Like a command. People I've known for years, their whole demeanor has changed. They're not interested in the same things. I've even caught people having meetings upstairs. I've locked the doors to those floors, and I've put up barricades in the stairwells, so no one could go above the first floor, but I still get up there. I can't get up there myself, but they somehow manage it. I can hear them. There's no lighting up there. They just sing in the dark. It's not chanting exactly, but like tones. They all mimic a tone and let the sound echo. You can even hear it outside. I hate coming in for work, especially at night. Being in there makes you feel like you have worms chewing away at your brain. It's hard to think. You forget how to breathe. And there's that constant fucking singing. We put the building up for sale a year ago, but we haven't had any offers. I don't think we ever will. The sooner we go bankrupt, the sooner I can get rid of this place.
Zach said that he's worried about his former business partner, Hart. Hart lives at the Slaughterhouse now, even though he has the money to keep his apartment. He doesn't leave the building anymore, Zach said. And he wears a cardigan sweater. We are delighted that Cherry Blossom Candies have increased their sponsorship of the show. Cherry Blossom Candies are the industry standard in confectionery compliance. Worried about teens sneaking out of the house at night? Worrying about drugs, alcohol, and lakeside skinny dipping? Well, worry no more. Introduce Cherry Blossom Candies to your teen's diet, and you'll be amazed by how polite, endearing, and yes, compliant they are to your commands. Many parents report that their students' grades increased a full letter after taking Cherry Blossom Candies into their diet. No more arguing about doing their homework after they practice their drums, and no more whining about how you just don't understand them. Give your teen the gift of understanding your commands. You only mean the best for them. They need to learn calculus, not how to rip a bong while skinny dipping lakeside with a bunch of hippies. Cherry Blossom Candies, the only choice in confectionery compliance.
A warm welcome to our next sponsor, Ferris Hinge Squeak. Do your door hinges swing too smooth? Are you tired of opening your basement hideaway and not hearing that sinister creak and groan you need to scare your new guest? Try Ferris Hinge Squeak. It can tackle the most slippery of lubricants and make any door or cabinet growl. Use the promo code QUEAK